Hi, and welcome to QA1 headquarters in Lakeville, Minnesota. My name is Jesse, and I got Damien with me here in the shop with a beautiful 73 Camaro. We got a whole bunch of boxes of parts in front of us. We're gonna be jamming our QA1 coilovers in place of those dusty old leaf springs in the rear. We're doing mod shots.
Yep.
We're gonna put 335 tires in the back.
Yeah, it's mini tubbed and ready to go.
Oh, that's beautiful. We're gonna do our QA1 control arms up front. This thing is gonna be handling awesome. Where do we start?
Let's start in the back.
I like it. Let's go.
Our second gen rear forelink does work with the factory axle housings. On this car, being that we're putting the 335s in there to go along with the mini tubs, we're also putting a narrowed axle in here. So in this case, we're gonna pull everything out. If you're keeping the factory axle in there, everything bolts back up to it.
So now that we talked about axles, first step is going to be getting these leaf springs dropped out of here. We're supporting our axle with this awesome jacks because we're working on a hoist, but you can absolutely do this in your driveway or garage with some jack stands and a floor jack.
Typically, you would take the drive shaft off before you remove the axle from the car. QA1 does offer subframe connectors that include a new trailing arm mount here, or a leaf spring mount. If you're not using the QA1 subframe connectors with your forelink, you will need to remove these and reuse them with the forelink install. Before you remove them, label them driver and passenger side so it's easier to remember which ones go on.
Now that we got the axle out of the way, you can see there's just not a lot of room to work in here. So we're going to pull this gas tank out of the way to make everything easier. We're going to reinstall it once everything's in. Another thing to note is that we've already cut the exhaust off here. That's either going to have to get rerouted in a very tight space, or going to have to come out the sides or just dump right in front of the axle. Okay, so now we got the tank out of the way, we're able to start mocking up and fitting our crossmember into place. We do have a two-piece design here that can adapt to either the early or the late second-gen F-body frame widths. Now we're gonna mark off where our 4 connection points are where we need to weld. We're gonna clean them up, hit them with a little bit of weld-through primer, and we can start moving along with that process. Marking, marking, it's just this easy. It's drawing, but you get to draw outside the lines instead of inside. There's no limits. Now that Damien's got the frame all cleaned up, we're ready to get this in for the last time, adjusted one final bit, and he's gonna burn it in.
So we've got the crossmember mounted in place. We want to have the rear flange mount flush to the bottom side of the frame rail, and then on the front, this flange here should be pretty close to the back of the frame rail edge. We do have some measurements in our install instructions where you can reference the factory bump stop hole up here and measure back to the front of this, 2 3/16 of an inch. And you can also measure from the bottom side of the frame rail up to the bottom of the flange here, and that should be 7 3/8 inches. Another thing to point out on this, the rear seat floor pan is not in the same spot on both sides. So on the driver's side, the trailing arm mount is going to be very close, if not touching, whereas on the passenger side, I can actually still get my finger through here, but this is properly located.
Now that Damien's got the hard work done of welding in our crossmember, I'm gonna take over on some of the easy stuff here, getting our trailing arms, or specifically our lower trailing arm to start with, mounted up so that we can start lining everything to make sure we're all good before welding in our upper trailing arms. We're using our QA1 front spring pocket. QA1 designed this with a two-piece construction so that you don't have to mess with any kind of subframe connectors or anything else when you're taking these in and out. So it makes it a lot easier. Another cool feature is that we supply those J nuts. If you've ever taken these in and out and tried to reuse them, you know they are a nightmare. So this one is really gonna help you guys out. Also, while we're up in here, since this one is mini tubs, is not a great example, but we do supply a block-off plate for where your factory shock would have mounted. All right, finally, we're adding our subframe connectors. These come with solid body mounts. We already got the front ones done. Adding these last ones as we're installing these. These also tie right into our rear spring pockets. All right, now that we got our lower trailing arms in, it's time to go to our upper trailing arms. One thing to note before we leave the lower trailing arm is that these will work in your factory spring pocket there. That'll work with, if you have existing subframe connectors that have a built-in front spring bucket, absolutely will work with that. If you can bolt this factory spring to it, you can bolt our trailing arms to it. Now up here, just a couple of spacers and we'll get this one lined all up. Now that we got our upper trailing arms connected to our cross member, we're gonna hook up our brackets that'll eventually get welded onto the axle so we can start measuring, centering, lining everything up, and then we're good to tack. All right, well, as promised, Damien did the hard work again, and he's got these things tacked up. So how we did that, again, we're measuring side to side, making sure that we're center, setting our pinion angle to 0, making sure that everything is matching there. We're using these little alignment fixtures on those upper trailing arms to keep everything straight. That helps us align where these are gonna land. Of course, with this narrow 9-inch axle, we do have to modify this radius just a little bit to fit this custom application. If you're using this on a stock 12-bolt axle, they're going to go right on that tube. You don't have to worry about anything there. So after our sway bar goes in here, I mean, that wraps up our 4-link. It's just that easy. We're ready to finish off this axle with a new third member. We'll get some hubs on it so we can put the wheels and brakes on. Brand new drive shaft, of course, get our fuel tank back in. Get this thing all buttoned up so that we can get it on the ground, get it dialed in. We're gonna slam this thing down, get those 335 meets back here, and it's gonna be awesome. Let's get this baby on the ground and see what she looks like. just finished up our second gen
Yeah.
F-body project. Thanks for the help there. This thing, we threw the catalog at it. It's looking awesome.
Yeah, we got the 275s up front, 335s out back. This thing's gonna drive awesome.
This is gonna handle great and it looks great to boot. So if you have any questions, go to QA1.net, give us a call at the tech line, hit us up on the social media stuff, and as always,
Go drive it.